My name is Ezekiel Vicente. I'm the COO and also Chief HR Officer of Mindvalley. I hold both roles, and I'm part of Mindvalley. And for some of you, probably Mindvalley needs no introduction, but in a nutshell, Mindvalley provides the education that regular school forgot. We teach people how to live extraordinary lives beyond just subsistence, and we're currently the leading personal growth company in the world, and we have the best personal growth programs, working with the best teachers we can possibly find on a variety of topics on anything that can lead you to live a better, higher conscious life, all the way from health and fitness, mental health, spirituality, peak performance, productivity and learning, all of that stuff. We've got it. Now, what I'm talking to you guys about today is not just specific, it's a really, really weird and difficult time in the world today, and it's getting stranger and stranger. And while originally I had a plan of catering this talk primarily for this period of time where the world is, I noticed that it would be much more valuable to give lessons on leading in a crisis and how Mindvalley is currently weathering the storm in a global crisis in general. And I feel that some of these lessons that we've learned will be useful either way in any crisis situation. And to do that, I'm going to give you guys a picture of what were we entering into come this year. And entering 2020, Mindvalley was in hyper growth mode. We've been experiencing at least 20-30% growth year on year for the past 4 or 5 years. Just from 2018 to 2019 alone, we grew by almost 50%. We had 20% more team members, and for a lot of you leaders who are watching and listening, a lot of new team members causes a strain in terms of the culture of the organization, because there's a lot of retraining, a lot of new people to get used to. It's like having a new person join your group of friends, and so it's not really the same group of people anymore. And we were transitioning to different business models, because in the past, Mindvalley used to primarily be in personal growth and online publishing, and then we moved and switched to becoming a tech company around 4 years ago, and we wanted to build our own platform to be able to serve personal growth to billions of people. And the shift towards those business models were causing some clashes operationally in the transition period. We were also experiencing growing pains, including a few rocky financial months, because we were really investing in growth. So we were thinking that coming into 2020, that this was going to be more of a let's fix things inside Mindvalley and try to tighten things up so we can get ready to scale. Well, that's not what happened, because this whole global crisis started and we were all caught off guard. And a big chunk of the pain that Mindvalley felt during this time period is that a big chunk of what makes Mindvalley are the events that we run across the globe. One of our biggest events, Mindvalley University, which is pretty much one of our flagship event, where we gather 1,000, 2,000, well, this year the plan was 2,000 of our customers and their families to join us in a city once a year somewhere around the world for 1 whole month of immersive learning in personal growth and connection. And that wasn't going to happen anymore. And a big chunk of Mindvalley's community and also our team were helping in make this happen. We were instantly seeing that 40% of our entire team was pretty much wiped out. Like they had nothing to do. Or rather, a lot of what they were supposed to do was postponed for like the next year. That's an entire business division of Mindvalley that had to shut down. And 40% of the roles in our team were related to them. So entering 2020, you were all in this mode of, okay, let's not go too crazy, let's fix things. And we were prepared for not so much growth for this year, and then this stuff happens. So, where are we now? Well, I'm proud to say that that's actually not what happened. Where Mindvalley is right now is we're on 100% runway growth for 2020, and we're experiencing the highest profit margins we've ever had in the entire Mindvalley history. Highest profit margins, 100% growth target, like projection for 2020, and we've had to lay off 0 people. 0. How did we do that? Now, I have to put a disclaimer here that some of these tips might not necessarily translate directly to different industries. But I would suggest just taking away the key concepts and principles behind it. All right, so I'm going to give you 4 keys on how Mindvalley went about this situation. Number 1 is that we've been expecting disruption for a very long time. That's like baked into Mindvalley's culture, that we think about envisioning about how to constantly push the status quo and preparing to disrupt ourselves. But what that also means is operations and culture, pretty much the same thing. They have to go hand in hand. Your culture determines how you run operations, and your operations reinforce the culture that you want. And what that means for a very long time is that we knew that jobs and skills can change easily in the future, but people don't. Especially in the industry that we're in, since we're in technology and online media, we know that roles and technology change so fast that some of the things that we're learning right now won't even be relevant anymore 1 year from now. So everyone is constantly changing and upgrading and learning new skills. But people's behavior, attitude, and values barely change. That's really hard to change. So we made sure that for a very long time, like almost from the entire history of Mindvalley, we've hired for attitude and we trained for skill, knowing this. So the hardest culture challenge to deal with inside organizations is when people don't fit in the culture of the organization, or they have very different belief systems from you. So we just eliminated that problem from the very get-go. So we were very lucky that we've been doing this for a very long time. The second thing that we've been working on for a long time as well was having a mindset of remote default. What does that mean? We always assumed that someone is physically not in the room every time we have meetings or anything that we do inside at work. Now, that was also very challenging because that shifts a lot of paradigm. There's a lot of leaders would say, oh my gosh, why are we trying to always figure out how to make this technology work? We're investing in new meeting, remote online tools. How come we're always working on online documentation every time we go through all of these strategy meetings, etc.? We've been working on that for years and years and tooting that horn with the anticipation that the future of work, a lot of it is not going to be confined to physical office spaces. We saw that coming, and we just bit the bullet and tried to make it as part of our culture as possible. So when the lockdown happened in Malaysia, we didn't even really flinch. We just said, okay, guys, don't come to the office. And we didn't have to change anything about how we operated. We just told everybody to stay at home, and we closed down the offices. So the change going from office environment to home environment was pretty much zero. Second step was the concept of chief reminding officers. Kind of like, it says a chief reminding office, but that's because my face is cutting off the R and the S. And what does that mean? One of the things that we realize, and that is also baked into Mindvalley, is that big goals will always trump overthinking. So when I run into like the train station going to work, there's always a person who's complaining about something really small to their friend or on the phone, telling me like, oh, I have a hole in my shoe. I stepped on bubblegum this morning. Maybe like my mom or my dad won't stop asking me when I'm going to get married. Yeah, but if your problems are much bigger than that, like saying, how do I change learning for 1 billion people in the next 5 to 6 years? Then all those small problems don't really make sense. So it turns out that one of the things that we really needed our leaders to do was to keep reminding the team about the big goals and vision that Mindvalley had, especially during this time period where it's very easy to let your monkey mind go crazy and over worry with all of the things that are being listened to in the news, etc. And another thing that we learned when it comes to this tip specifically is the whole concept of spaghetti across the wall on being chief and on, like, there's different cycles to how organizations grow. And at the beginning, there was a time in Mindvalley where we're trying to figure out, okay, we want to move more into tech platforms so that we can serve 1 billion people better. What does that look like? So you keep tossing things and new strategies on the wall to try to see what sticks. And during that time period, we didn't have a lot of very strong clarity on what exactly the product was like a few years ago. But now we had. And what we were seeing is that our team was composed of soldiers and artists. And soldiers were the people who were really amazing at execution, and the artists were like mostly the dreamers who thought very much out of the box. And this time period, given that we had less resources and things were really tight and quite stressful, that we were able to see that, okay, we need every hand and every person to be able to contribute really effectively to what's going on. And it forced us to really focus on seeing, hey, we have the plan, we have the product vision. Let's make sure that all efforts are going into it. And that this is when we realized that at this stage in Mindvalley, we weren't tossing spaghetti on the wall anymore. We were in scaling mode, and we needed people to be more of soldiers who had artist tendencies rather than artists who had soldier tendencies. So that was a pretty stern conversation to have with the team to say that, guys, we need you to innovate within the vision, not outside of the vision, because that's not the stage of where Mindvalley is anymore. Tip number 3 is to lean on transparency and candor when in doubt. Again, my face is blocking the candor word. And what does that mean? So when people are in a crisis, the perception of time becomes smaller. What do I mean by that? When things are all going great, people are thinking of, okay, what's going to be next year for me? What are the next 5 years going to be for me? Because they have that sense of safety that everything is going just fine. But when you're in a crisis and you're not necessarily sure about what the next 6 months are going to be, your perception of time becomes smaller. You think about what's next month, what's next week, or at worst case, especially during times of really deep crisis, like say in wartime, you're thinking what's happening tomorrow or what's happening later. So how do you deal with that? Because that provides a lot less psychological safety for people. So what you have to do, or rather what we did, was we've been adopting this concept called OODA Loop, which we got was like an Air Force concept, wherein instead of trying to, or like the people who the pilots who were able to get the most number of like kills and results in training were not the ones who saved the most bullets. They were the ones who shot the most bullets, and they would use the bullet train to be able to try and use it as like a tracer to be able to hit their targets more. So they fired more bullets, but they used them as a way to get accurate. And that means acting on 70 to 80% certainty and communicating really rapidly. So the last thing that we really want, that people want, is long bouts of silence, of leaders not saying anything about what's going on. They appreciated more that we were upfront in saying, hey, this is what we know right now. It's not absolutely 100% certain, but we're going to keep you guys updated as things go, because the short perception of time requires a lot more communication for people to feel that things are going to be okay or things are under control. And we were very fortunate that this was also fairly baked into Mindvalley's culture. And the last piece and last tip that I would like to point out is to hang on to objectives and not jobs. And what do I mean by that? Well, giving people problems to solve with clear outcomes and leave them alone was something that we learned from Richard Branson's concept, where he said that hire smart people and then get out of their way. But during this period for Mindvalley, we realized that, okay, the whole structure is changing, the strategy is changing. So if people were so hung up on their current job descriptions, especially the 40% of our team that was very much affected by the cancellation and postponing of some of our projects, then they wouldn't be able to move. But if we focused on giving people, here are the problems that Mindvalley needs to be solving within the next 2 weeks, 1 month, and these are the outcomes that we want, people could orient themselves around these problems and find the best ways to be able to like organize and work on these problems, irregardless of what their jobs were before that. Now, if they were so stuck on their existing job descriptions, then that would make the entire team incredibly flexible. So we've been using this framework called OKRs, which stands for like objectives and key results, which was adopted by Google and a couple of other really successful agile organizations. That has been a godsend for Mindvalley, primarily because people were given very strong objectives. People knew exactly how they would know that they've already won. And the focus would be more of, okay, how do we get rid of the barriers and what does your day-to-day activity look like? The how can change in terms of how what they're doing every day, but the key results and the objectives stay the same. So that allows people to get fairly creative about how to solve and reach these objectives, but at the same time keeping them very tightly focused. Loyalty to the objectives and the key results, and not necessarily to the job description that they have, allows for a lot more flexibility in the long run. So we created roles and problems to solve for the 40% of the team that was affected. We had people in our team who were filmmakers and producers who jumped on other projects in part-time capacity and multiple projects in different capacities for the interim so that they could contribute to the team. And that level of flexibility has led us to be able to utilize almost everyone in the team, even though they weren't really doing their normal jobs at this time period, at least especially for this time period. And that's how we were able to see that, oh, we actually don't need to lay anybody off right now. And I mean, we would love to keep our team. We love our team members. Let's make sure that we give them a chance to be able to contribute to Mindvalley. And that's how they ended up. So here are the 4 keys again. Number 1 was to expect disruption. So bake the idea of self-disruption into your culture. Disrupt yourself first by using culture and operations together. I think I'm pretty lucky that I'm holding both of those roles together. Number 2 is to remind people of the mission and goal until it gets tiring. And by the way, when it does get tiring, repeat it once more. I think I remember somebody saying that if the moment every single person in an organization can repeat the objectives verbatim, that's when you know you've done it right. Transparency and candor is always better than hiding the truth. Just be honest about it, and be honest that you're also not completely 100% sure, but you'll constantly update the team. And the last one was to give problems to solve with clear outcomes. Be adaptable, but solve the right problems. So this gives people the creativity to be able to orient themselves around very important problems for the organization, rather than telling them exactly, this is your job and just do it, which is extremely rigid and not very inspiring. Alrighty, and we also have areas that we're looking into because a big chunk of Mindvalley's culture has been very much disrupted as well, even though we're doing very, very well. And the first part is that this is our leadership model of Mindvalley, and one of the biggest chunks that were really deeply affected was our connection culture. Now, we have a very rich social life inside the Mindvalley team, and the reason why we had that in the first place was because Gallup found that people who had a best friend at work were 7 times more likely to fully engage. And that's why we emphasized a lot on our office environment, our social environment, our interpersonal relations inside the team. And having no office and minimal physical interaction with people really, really pose a challenge to that. So we're finding ways to get really creative on how to foster these relationships, and we're testing a lot of things. I know for a fact that the desire for more one-on-ones online between team members and also team leaders are becoming more and more common informally inside the Mindvalley team, and we're observing the format in how people are doing these. And the second one that's been fairly disrupted was our culture of growth for our team members. And a lot of the activities that we did before to make growing fun was to do them all together as well. So now we're pivoting, because we used to do personal growth together. We would have career sessions together. This was a combination of both social and growth for our team. And that's been completely disrupted too. So we're also looking into ways on how to make this easier to do, given that our team is scattered everywhere. We actually have team members who are scattered in other parts of the world, and they can't even come back here in Malaysia. All right, and the other question, which has been burning in my mind too, is that will all this work in the long run? And the answer to that is, I don't know. I mean, one of my favorite books says like only time will tell. And as with the OODA Loop concept, we are learning and adapting as fast as we can. And if you guys ask me within the next like 3 to 6 months after we do our reflection and introspection, haha, Tracy, then I'll probably have a better answer for you if this all worked out fine and what were the areas that we could polish up better. And to end this presentation, I was thinking about one of the things that was in my mind a lot as we were going through the really high pressure moments of the past couple of weeks and months, is that the easiest thing to forget when you're trying to win a game under pressure is the manner in how you win. Because sometimes winning is all that matters, especially when you're desperate. But actually, that's probably the most important thing. And I made a couple of mistakes, I would say, from a leadership standpoint in the past couple of weeks and months too. And I will definitely remember those. But the reason why this is important is that how you win determines the type of people who will stay with you for the rest of a season, not just for the match that you won. Like how you win determines the way the team talks to their friends and prospective new team members. How you win determines the type of partnerships, people, and opportunities that come your way. And how you win also determines the level of peace you have within at the end of the day. If you can look at yourself and say, I feel like I did the right thing today. And we'll never always get it perfectly right. I mean, we'll always make mistakes on the path. It'll cost opportunities. It'll cost people time. It will be painful when the mistakes come. But I'm asking all of you, and I'm also asking myself, to do our best to think about how we go about winning. Because the way we win matters just as much as winning itself. Alrighty, and that would be it for me. Thank you guys for having me. And if this happens again in the near future, I'm part of, if I'm able to present again to you guys, we'll give you further findings on how the next couple of months will be for Mindvalley, if this all worked out or we had to pivot again somewhere in the middle. Thank you all, and have a great rest of the day.